This is the Ayn Odin 2 Mini. The Odin 2 Mini is one of Ayn's new products. I found it on Facebook Marketplace and was like, this looks exactly like a PS Vita, and I'm totally down to get one in my hands. I mean, I have the PS Vita 1000, 2000, and the Odin 2 Mini looks just like this. I mean, it's pretty similar, right? Besides the joysticks being positioned differently, the rest of the device pretty much looks the same. It came right after the Ayn Odin 2. The Ayn Odin 2 had a couple of different versions to them. There was the base version, the Pro version, and the Max version. I have the Pro version, and the Ayn Odin 2 Pro was by far my favorite retro emulation handheld. Out of all the games I can emulate, the Ayn Odin 2 can pretty much emulate all of them. At this point, it wouldn't be a hardware issue, it would be a software issue if anyone does run into any problems. Retro emulation handhelds come out with devices pretty often, so there's always another new thing. But out of all the devices that came out after the Ayn Odin 2, I didn't really think any of them would be better than the Ayn Odin 2. But when I did see the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, it reminded me so much of the PS Vita that this is probably the next my version of an unofficial PSP3. So I just had to get it. The first time I unboxed the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, it looked way better than it did online. Comparing it to the PS Vita, they're both not that different in size. Even in thickness, they're pretty much the same. I think Ayn did a really great job if they were trying to mimic the PS Vita. Granted, the button positions are different, but the way they look are pretty similar. The Ayn Odin 2 Mini is a great size. It fits in the hands, it feels super comfortable to hold. I don't really feel strain from holding it that long. Comparing the Ayn Odin 2 Mini with other devices, such as the first Odin 2 and the PS Vitas, you can see that the size between the handhelds aren't that much different. But comparing it with the ROG Ally X, for example, you can see that the Odin 2 Mini is significantly smaller than the ROG Ally X. The Ayn Odin 2 Mini is very slim, very sleek, very pocketable. I can see why a lot of people would get this over the Steam Deck, and I have been using this for 2 weeks now, playing even my Android games. So I can play like Zenless Zone Zero or even like Wuthering Waves. Setting those up to play isn't that bad, and the Steam Deck can't do that, so you could use this to play other games that the Steam Deck isn't compatible with. The Odin 2 Mini has these cool clicky buttons. You can tell that the start and select buttons are a little bit clickier than the face buttons. The D-pad are dome switch D-pads, and they feel really good to press. The face buttons do feel very smushy, but other than that, they feel great. And the translucent white ones just look pretty sick. They are pretty similar to the face buttons on the PS Vita. There seems to be a lot more room to actually hit the buttons. This one is pretty, there's not as much room, but they do feel nicer pressed. So I was wondering why Ayn didn't really use the same buttons as the PS Vita, but I guess to each their own, right? These joysticks are the same as the ones on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. You can also switch them out with other ones as well, if you can find some custom ones. So I thought that was pretty cool, but they feel pretty awesome to use. And the shoulder buttons are clicky as well. And Ayn made the shoulder buttons the same clear translucent look as the ones on the PS Vita, which is awesome. So in addition to the shoulder buttons, they do have triggers, and these triggers are analog triggers. They do feel really good to press. What's weird to me is that the D-pad is at the bottom. I'm not really used to that, especially since the way that you hold the device. Your thumb would be normally here, but whenever I'm playing those retro games where I'm using the D-pad more, I do have to like move my thumb down in an awkward position. And after a bit, that does get very straining. So I just think that if I just had the joystick here and the D-pad up here, it'd be a lot more comfortable to use, since mainly being an emulation device, the D-pad would be used more often. Here are the vents. The speakers are front-facing speakers, and they are loud. very loud, but they do sound very clear. Then you have the power button, the volume buttons, micro HDMI output, I believe. And this is where your micro SD card goes for all your ROMs. I do have a 1 terabyte in there. On the bottom, you do have a USB-C port. With the USB-C port, it does come with a video output, so that's awesome to use. And of course, you have your earphone jack. Now, another great thing about this device compared to the original Odin 2 is the screen. Like I said, the screen is a mini LED panel, so the colors do come a little bit more vibrant. It does come brighter, like insanely bright. Since the screen can get so bright, my camera makes it look super overexposed. I can't imagine it being a problem when you're playing it outdoors, since the screen can compensate for that bright sunny day. Compared to the Odin 2, there are some times when if I'm not sitting under a shade and I'm playing the Odin 2 outside, it does get a little bit hard to see just because of those reflections. So having the Ayn Odin 2 Mini with that bright screen, I'm pretty confident in playing it outside in direct sunlight. The colors on the screen are just nicer looking in a way compared to the Odin 2. And when I have these devices next to each other, you can just see that the colors are a little bit more vibrant. The screen is brighter. The Ayn Odin 2 Mini does have this vignette around the sides of the screen, and to be honest, it kind of looks pretty cool. The only negatives from the Odin 2 to the Odin 2 Mini are battery life, ergonomics, and heat distribution. So battery life, smaller device, pretty understandable. Ergonomics, it is the PS Vita, pretty much. The PS Vita itself is not that great ergonomically, right? And if Ayn was trying to replicate that, ergonomics, same thing. Heat distribution, pretty sure is noticeable. Whenever I'm gaming on this for a long period of time, I don't really notice the heat, but let's say my fingers slowly drift to the center, yeah, I can feel it. It's like uncomfortable hot. Sometimes when I'm touching the screen as well, for the touch inputs, same thing. The heat is pretty noticeable and it does get uncomfortable to touch. Now, comparing hardware specs with the Odin 2 Mini and the Odin 2 Pro that I have, the interiors to these two devices are exactly the same. This is the Odin 2 Pro, and the Odin 2 comes in 3 different variations. It comes in the Odin 2 base model, the Odin 2 Pro, and the Odin 2 Max. I did see online, because I was debating between the Odin 2 Pro and the Odin 2 Max, which one to get. And the results from the 2 variations weren't that big of a difference. This is the Odin 2 Mini Pro, and the internal specs to this is pretty much the exact same as the Odin 2 Pro. The only difference is that it's smaller, has that mini LED screen, and a smaller battery life. So if you're someone looking for a smaller device and that nostalgic feeling of holding something that looks like the PS Vita, the Odin 2 Mini is the way to go. And you can see that the size difference is pretty big. Since they're both pretty much the same, all I really did was take the micro SD card that was already formatted and organized with all my ROMs and BIOS files on the Odin 2 Pro. I did just take out that micro SD card, did the initial setup for the Odin 2 Mini, and got all my emulators back and my front end loader with Daijisho. So once I put in that micro SD card, all I had to do was resync up and basically just locate the folders that are on the micro SD card and then sync it through that way. And then all the games were pretty much loaded here, including the game save datas as well. They're all in here. So if you do end up getting the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, the setup is fairly simple. Exactly the same as the Odin 2. So you could just Google the setup for the Odin 2 and it would be pretty much the same as the Odin 2 Mini. I guess one of the only differences now would be emulators for Switch and 3DS, but a simple Google for those emulators aren't that difficult, to be honest. So the rundown for setting up the Odin 2 Mini is fairly simple, kind of like the base point of how to set up the Odin 2 Mini. So you would start with the Odin's initial setup. After you get the initial setup done, you start looking for your emulators and start downloading it. Once you have all the emulators added, you would put all your BIOS files and your ROMs onto your micro SD card, dump that into the Odin 2 Mini, and then you would download a front-end loader. After you download a front-end loader, you start it up, and then direct those front-end loaders for which emulators go to which ROM folders and which BIOS folders. And that's pretty much the rundown on how to set it up. You can always go more in depth by Googling these guides. There are a bunch of different guides online. Those online written guides are just more of like a checklist for me, and I just check off every single thing that needs to be done. Didn't take me that long since I already have the ROMs and the BIOS in a micro SD card from the Odin 2, and I just took it from the Odin 2 and put it into the Odin 2 Mini. So out of all the emulators that I've installed and tested and tried out, one of the emulators that I didn't really use that often would be Vita 3K. When I got the Odin 2 and now with the Odin 2 Mini, I gave Vita 3K another try, and by far it is the biggest pain in the ass for me setup. It just did not work when it's supposed to, so I gave up on it. It's just, to me, it just wasn't worth it since I could just play the PS Vita games on my PS Vita. So this Odin 2 Mini did become anything but the PS Vita. Even though it was hard for me to set up, if you do try hard enough, you would be able to do it. It's just not my cup of tea. I didn't want to do it. This is a device that I would recommend to a lot of people just because it is fairly expensive for a retro emulation device. This device is more suited for people that have the money to burn for a pretty powerful Android handheld, and someone that is more of a hobbyist looking to collect devices that look like maybe one of their favorite devices, the PS Vita. And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's any other good financial reason to be spending this much for this device anyways. If you already have the Odin 2, this wouldn't be an upgrade at all. This is for the people that know that they want something specifically looking like the PS Vita. This is something that I like, something that looks cool, something that looks sleek. It's for those kind of people. So that's the Odin 2 Mini. Awesome device, looks cool, looks just like the PS Vita, and is pretty much the emulation king because it's pretty much the Odin 2. The Ayn Odin 2 Mini, here are some checks for me. Portability, pocketability, D-pad, face buttons, and the bright screen. And like I said, the compromises being battery life, price. The screen size is an inch smaller compared to the older one, and heat. So that's the Ayn Odin 2 Mini. Let me know down below in the comments if this is the Ayn Odin 2 that you've been waiting for, that emulation king that you've been waiting for all this time in this perfect form factor, or let me know if you're still questioning why people are justifying the purchase of a $400 handheld. Again, a great way for you guys to help support this channel is to give this video a like, share it to a friend that is pondering on the idea of picking up the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, and as always, subscribe. Thanks. Peace.